Hey, welcome back to another edition of Everything Football 62. I'm your host, Jonathan Big Tex Johnson, aka Uncle Tex, aka Professor Tex. Before we get started, smash that like button, share, subscribe to the page, and football season right around the corner. We're gonna go ahead and jump into this real quick, man. I might be a little wild tonight, man. You guys pretty much know this been rolling with for a little bit. Y'all know I don't really start talking about anything serious. I don't really care about all that personal stuff. It's all about football. All the other off the field mess, I don't really have nothing to do with that. Don't care about it and whatnot. It ain't got nothing to do with what's on that 100-yard field. Let's start right now. Corey Dillon has been making a lot of noise here the last week or so, like that, like I've never pretty much heard before. Haven't heard much of him really since he actually retired. It's been a while. Let's just get this straight. This is no hate, no shade on Corey Dillon. Corey Dillon was an angry running back. Even before they started saying angry running, when they always likened that to Adrian Peterson and whatnot. Corey Dillon was a beast off the rip. The best running back that the Cincinnati Bengals franchise has ever had. Lucky they've had him. And now Corey Dillon, because what's interesting about this, and I knew this was going to happen, after the 2019 season, going into the 2020 at the 100-year anniversary, which was going to be the 2020 season, COVID season, and whatnot, because it actually started September 26, 1920. So as the 2020 season would have actually really marked the 100th year anniversary of them actually starting on the day of. Okay. Corey Dillon, the thing that, like I said, a very angry runner, physical, did some great things in the 7 years that he was there with the miserable Cincinnati Bengals team. Didn't hear a lot of him talking about a lot of things even after he retired. He was eligible. I want to say Corey was eligible for enshrinement 6, probably after the 2012 season, because you got to wait 6 years. So it's 2023. About 11 years or so has passed by. About 10, 11 years have passed by since he is talking about Hall of Fame. I never heard him talk about any of that stuff. Now, first and foremost, there's no doubt that he's the best running back in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals franchise. There's no doubt about that. Only problem I got with Corey now is Corey's running around here talking about possibly that he should be in the Hall of Fame. So what if it's about numbers? And so let's break this shit down right now so everybody can see exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this here and whatnot. And this is what everybody has to put in consideration when we start talking about this, because of guys putting up inflated numbers. And I knew this was going to happen when the 2020 Hall of Fame class came up with 15 inductees, right? And I say, watch, go back to that year. I say, watch, they're going to get to a point where they're going to start throwing everybody in, because now you got players that are coming out and say, well, I belong in the Hall of Fame. I belong in the Hall of Fame. I belong in the Hall of Fame. Everybody's saying that they belong in the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to break down to you why they aren't, not saying they're not going to probably get put in there, but why they aren't and why they shouldn't really be considered that. I've told you guys before, if you didn't make it in your first ballot, second ballot, third ballot, then you're not that guy. Like my man said on that other, you're not that guy. You're not that guy, right? Which is funny. But let's run down the numbers. And have a beautiful breakdown about Corey Dillon and a lot of the things that he did. And let's look at a few of them. And the 4.3, 70 and 10,000, 70, I guess, average of 70 yards a game and 10,000 yards. And Corey Dillon's 4.3, average 75, and he finished with 11,241 yards. Dillon is just won a 6-back Super Bowl era, at least 4 seasons of 1,100 yards. Only Barry Sanders and Fred Taylor have more, 7. Fine, I'll talk about Fred Taylor later. Dillon began his career 6 consecutive 1,100-yard seasons, 4.4, 80 rushing yards a game in that span. He did so with a defense consistently stacked against him as the Bengals quarterback struggled. Only 16 of the 84 starts featured a quarterback with an average passer rating and the most ranked in the bottom. And then a lot of the bums Unfortunately, my man Jeff Blake's on there, but Jeff Blake had a couple of good years, Boomer Esiason and whatnot. Dillon broke rookie rushing that stood for over 40 years, 246 yards, 4 touchdowns in the game in '97. He broke Peyton's single rushing that stood for 23 years, 278 yards in 2000. He averaged more yards per carry than his quarterback's yards per attempt. Sound like Eric Dickerson. Then he won the Super Bowl with Patriots. He could spend 3 years with the Patriots. There was some more of Corey's numbers. And all that is true. He rushed for over 8,061 yards, 45 touchdowns with a 4.3 average. Now, that's good. Very good. Not Hall of Fame good. I'm going to show you how deep this is. You go to the 3 years that he went to New England. He had 37 touchdowns, which is 8 less in 3 years, right? The 45, he almost averaging about 1,066 yards or something like that for the 3 years that he played there. His magnum opus was 1,635 with 12 touchdowns. 733 the next year with 12 touchdowns. 812 with 13 touchdowns. After 32 years old, after you 30, Bill Belichick has been around the block quite some time, and he'll tell you that after a certain time, it's like those backs don't have it no more. All of that's good. Now let's do this. Go back to the 7 years of him being with Cincinnati. You know what the record of Cincinnati was during that particular time when he played for those 7 years? They were 34-78. That's what? A winning percentage of what, 200-300? No. Sorry, my man. Even with those good yards that you put up in a 16-game schedule, even with those yards you put up, all you had was a 34-78 record and never went to the playoffs. But that's not a knock on him. That's a knock on the franchise. And they're never giving him any help. However, because they talk about the incompetent quarterbacks that he played with, right? And although that may be true, however, if you're that guy, you do something. Case in point, I'll give you 3 names. I'll give you O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson from 1973, 4, 5, 6, 7. For 5 years, he led the league in rushing for 4 years because he was all he had. When you do that, and then you rush for 2,000, and then you rush for 18, and then 15, and 12, and then another 14 that goes along with that, dude, that is productivity, which has made him the back of the 70s. Okay? All decade back. Now, people are bitching, complain, and moan about that. I say, but those are the types of things you have to do. O.J. Simpson played in one playoff game. One. But that is what he did. All you have to do is go look up in black bold letters on Pro Football Reference where he led in a 5-year span. He led 4 years in a row. He led 4 years where he was the leading rusher in the NFL. That's why he's considered an all-time great. Earl Campbell, first 3 years in the league, he was an offensive player of the year 3 years in a row. 1 year he won both of them. In some circles, he was offensive player of the year and NFL MVP for 3 years in a row. Led the league in rushing 3 years in a row. 13-something, another 500 because they had to strike shortened season. And then I think he did another 13. And then after that, he's pretty much done. But Earl will tell you he was only trying to play 8 or 9 years anyway. That's why he's not Hall of Fame worthy. That's why. And regardless of all the things that he did, when we go back and we start talking about all the things that he did, and he don't want to pull no punches about it, he goes on a tangent about this, he says it's about this, it's about that, and stuff like that. He had some great games, 246, 278. He gets that. That puts him in the Cincinnati Bengals Ring of Honor or their Hall of Fame. And he also thinks that he deserves to be in the New England Patriots Hall of Fame, but it's like, that's not the way that works. You have to be a lifer to be there, to get in that, and be productive. He was only there for 3 years. Productive 3 years, but he was only there for 3 years. 37 touchdowns, but he was only there for 3 years. So I highly doubt if he ever gets in there because he's not considered a Pat. And he's not considered one of those guys. He just passed through because after a certain time, those guys just passed through. A lot of guys came and went there. Let's go to Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor's another one that's talking. This is a guy, another angry runner. Played for and finished his career up with the Pats. His career close to that of Dillon's. Dillon's. Now, Fred Taylor, because I always say, look, how many Pro Bowls, even when Pro Bowls actually counted, how many All-Pros? See, the thing about Corey Dillon, if you go back to Corey Dillon, there's no first-team All-Pros. There may be a second-team All-Pro, but there's no first-team All-Pros. There's no Offensive Player of the Year. There's no leading rusher. There's no leading in carries, no leading in yards, no leading in touchdowns, no leading in any of that. He had a very good career. For the 7 years he played there, the 3 times he made the Pro Bowl. He didn't get his 4th Pro Bowl until he was 30 years old, and he played for the Pats, and then they got a ring there, and then got a chance to go play in the playoffs with them, even after that, right? So the funny thing about that is that with Fred Taylor, his best year is what it was. He had 12-23, 13-99, 13-14, 15-72. 1202. He finished up with 11,695 yards and 66 touchdowns. Good back, very good back. Not Hall of Fame worthy. Let's do this here. Let's do this. Let's go to that of what we have here. Let's go here to that of his contemporaries, which would be the 2000 All-Decade team. Edgerrin James. He's not seeing Edgerrin James. Edgerrin James and the yards that he amassed his first 2 years in the NFL. He led the league twice. 4-time Pro Bowler, 1-time first-team All-Pro. He went in the Hall of Fame exactly when he was supposed to go in the Hall of Fame, probably second or third ballot Hall of Fame, right, and whatnot. Plays the playoff games and whatnot. Offensive Rookie of the Year, All-Decade team, very great coming out of the backfield. He came in the time and did what he was supposed to do. I'm taking Edgerrin James over either one of those guys. But LaDainian Tomlinson, there's no question. We don't even need to discuss that. Now, this is the caveat here. Now, when you go into that Shaun Alexander, let's go to Shaun Alexander. Shaun Alexander finished with 100 touchdowns. From 2001 to 2005, he was one of the top backs in the league, even though it didn't show, but it really started showing in 2003, 4, and 5. First team All-Pro, Offensive Player of the Year, MVP of the league. Finished with 27 touchdowns in 2005. That's the year they went to the Super Bowl and played against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Detroit. 1,880 yards, 27 touchdowns, led the league. Triple crown, quadruple crown, if you will, but definitely triple crown in attempts, yards, touchdowns, and he averaged 117 yards a game. Right? So from 2001 to 2, 3, 4, 5, you're talking about somebody went 13, 18, 14 touchdowns, 1175, 16 touchdowns, 1435, 14 touchdowns, 1696, 16 touchdowns, 1880, 27 touchdowns. If he averages at least 1,200 for at least the next 2 seasons, it gives him 11,000 and possibly 125 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, possibly a second ballot Hall of Fame. Maybe a first, but definitely second and definitely third. He's not in the Hall yet. Would I pick Dillon over him? Possibly. Him and Taylor, because they ran a lot more. However, The difference what they have to understand and realize is that Edgerrin James, those Daniel Thomas, and Sean Alexander, they go to Jamal Lewis. We can go to Jamal Lewis. Jamal Lewis, let's check him out. 1364, missed the whole season between injury and had some issues and whatnot. 1327, 2016, he led the league. He's Offensive Player of the Year. He's in an elite crew that rushed for over 2,000 yards. 1,006 and a lot of 1,100, 1,300 and 1,000 some odd yards and whatnot, and out of the league by the time he's 29, 30 years old. Now, this is what I'm talking about. So the difference with these guys is the fact that when you go back to him, Jamal Lewis, all of these guys were in the playoffs consistently. Not Fred Taylor, not Corey Dillon. They all led the league in the rushing at one time or another. Not Fred Taylor, not Corey Dillon. That's why those guys aren't in the Hall of Fame. But see, you knew these guys was going to start screaming this. You didn't hear them guys talking a lot of that stuff after they retired. After the 6 years is up, which is in 2012, it wasn't a lot of talk. Even though social media was just kind of getting this thing going on, those guys did not have that type of career. That's why they didn't say anything. It wasn't until the 2020 Hall of Fame class when they let 15 jokers in, goes back to the 17 that they had in the inaugural, and I can understand that. But they didn't have that. And those guys feel as though that every guy's coming out of the woodwork saying, I should have this, I'll be doing one tomorrow on Brandon Marshall. He's another one that's put up some nice numbers, but he was not that guy. Never went to the playoffs. One time All-Pro first team. 4 or 5 times I think that he might have went to the Pro Bowl or something like that. What hell of a back. Big target, but he lumbered down the field. He was like that of a tight end to an extent, but had the speed of that of a decent tight end. But he didn't have that. He wasn't Megatron. Okay, let's get that shit straight. He was not Megatron. But I'll talk about that tomorrow. Now, going into Fred, talking about Fred, like I said, talking about Fred Taylor again. Now, you go back, hell of a career, only 66 touchdowns. Dillon, how many did Dillon have? Dillon had 82 touchdowns. Right? Maybe if he gets 100, we're having a different conversation. He didn't. He was on a perennial loser, and he never put the team on his back. The other player I want to talk about that basically put the team on his back, similar to that of Corey Dillon, who had never had a quarterback, was Eric Dickerson, and I don't even need to go into that whole detail there. Aside from 1,800 as a rookie, over 1,800 as a rookie, over 2,000 in the second year, 16, 15, 14, 15, 14, 13. I don't need to say no more about that. For a 5 or 6 year run, Eric Dickerson was the best running back for half a decade. You need to at least play a decade, and you need to dominate and be the top in your position. You go back to Cincinnati Bengals and that of the greatest players that ever played in their franchise, it was Anthony Munoz. And if you're not doing what Anthony Munoz was a perennial All-Pro, Pro Bowler, the best at his position every fucking year that he played. Corey Dillon was not that. Fred Taylor was not that. They was not that. Wasn't that. Sorry, guys. Hate to put that on you. Was not that. It wasn't that. If you try to compare the other different backs that will come along a little bit later or at the same time, you follow again. Go back. Let's go back to that of the 2000. Well, 90s. We'll go back to 2000. Going to the 90s, you got Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Thurman Thomas, Terrell Davis. Right? Marshall Faulk kind of falls into the line. He's one of the guys who if I'm not mistaken, is not not an all-decade player at the time when you think he would possibly play, which would be in the 90s, part of that 2000, because he kind of came at that time there. But again, Faulk and the things that he did was astronomical. Look at his yards. Over 12,000, 100 touchdowns. And we talk about receiving touchdowns, 36. Okay. Thurman Thomas, I mean, dude, we can go on and on. And these are the benchmarks to me of a back that does it year in and year out, over 1,000 some odd yards, about 1,100 yards a year, and making 6 or 7, 8 touchdowns, and a threat out the backfield at any given time. Okay, that's why these guys are not in. That's why. And these guys were in the particular guys that I named got Super Bowl rings or went to Super Bowls 4 times in a row. Those other guys didn't do that. Fred Taylor didn't do that. Corey Dillon didn't do that. They didn't put the team on his back. Earl Campbell carried for 3 years, 2 years in a row. He took his team to the AFC playoffs off his back, off of a team that he is the only Hall of Famer on that particular team in that particular era. You might not like it, but it's true. If those guys do that, we're not having this conversation. No conversation at all. If you want to try to throw Curtis Martin in, Curtis Martin did some things. He was steady and all of that. You cannot start trying to say, well, Floyd Little's in the Hall of Fame or Leroy Kelly's in the Hall of Fame. I don't want to hear that. Different era, different time. You got more and more back with the competition was a lot more stiff. You can't help the time that you was born. Okay? So let's get that out of the way. Can't help the time that you was born and whatnot. So that's what these guys got to understand and realize when it comes to this. And like I told you about Sean Alexander. But I would take those other guys over them other guys. If they would have done something similar to those other backs, I would take, in that decade, I would replace them in a heartbeat. But guess what? They never led the league, and they were on perennial losing squads. Thus, that 2,000 yards, that is what put Jamal losing it and consistently rushing for 1,100 to 1,200 yards a year. Fred Taylor didn't do that. And win. And never led the league in rushing. Same with Corey Dillon. Never led the league in anything except for he had a 96-yard run, as well as he broke Jim Brown's record as a rookie, rushing for over 240 some odd yards, and he broke Walter Payton's record. No shade on that, but those are games. A lot of guys, even in the quarterbacks who have did a bunch of yards and stuff like that, those guys won games. So if you don't have a quarterback, it's on you. They didn't have a quarterback, it was on them. They was very good, but they didn't lead like that of what an O.J. Simpson or Earl Campbell did, or that of Eric Dickerson. They didn't do that. They would have had to do that to be in the conversation to talk about being that of a Hall of Famer. Okay? That's how this goes. But I knew this was going to happen. If you go to the inaugural class of 1963 who was in the Hall, you had 11 players, 1 founder, and 5 owners. 17. And then 15 when they hit in 2020. Okay? It shouldn't be no more than 7 or 8 guys going to the Hall of Fame. At least 4 or 5 players and 2 owners and 1 who was a contribution or whatever, if that's what you need. So coaches and executives. 7 or 8. And now it's getting to a point to me where they open, I say, watch, they're going to open up the gates and they're going to let any and everybody up in this bad boy and whatnot. So those guys may eventually end up getting in. I don't think they need to be in because what is it? They were very good players. They wasn't Mount Rushmore. Goes back to what Deion Sanders said. You got the guys in the Hall of Fame and you got the Hall of Game. Because not all of those guys are created equal. And we got to stop. These guys got to stop with this whole thing because they have these numbers, inflated numbers because, okay, well, this, that, and the other. Well, even if you have those inflated numbers, did you lead the league in those inflated numbers? No, you didn't. O.J. Simpson did. Eric Dickerson did. Earl Campbell did. They didn't have any quarterbacks. They had subpar wide receivers, decent defense here and there, but it was all about on the shoulders of that back. Corey Dillon didn't have that. Fred Taylor didn't have that. Fred Taylor got a few games where Jacksonville caught a few lightnings in the bottle, but at the same time, they did not lead. That's the difference. It was no leading. What did you lead in? Did you lead in anything? And that's where the issue comes in with these guys who want to get in the Hall of Fame that appears to have numbers. But what kind of numbers did they do? Did they lead in anything? And they did not. They had very good careers, but they did not have Hall of Fame careers. That's the caveat, and that is why those guys are not in the Hall of Fame. You know what I'm saying? That's why they're not in the Hall of Fame. And that's the problem. You can't go in there putting any and everybody in there. If you go to Shaun Alexander, like I said, if he finishes up 1,200, he's in the Hall because he already had 100 touchdowns. Go back from 2001 to 2005. Shaun Alexander had 87 touchdowns. 87. It's a lot of points, dude. That's a lot of points. And LT, LaDainian Tomlinson, he had 72. Dude, that's 159 touchdowns that these guys scored in a 5-year span between the both of them. That's a lot of points that you're putting on the board. And they help their teams win some games. That's why they're all decade. And the other guys are not. Again, they're not dealing with Edrin and they're not dealing with LT. I could take them and put them over there with them other guys, and I'll be perfectly content with the second team all decade team. But they got the right guys in there because those are the guys that actually led. That's why. And those guys look at numbers. Like I tell you, numbers online get emotional. People do. That's why Mr. Dillon did. But Corey Dillon does belong in the inaugural Ring of Honor in Cincinnati. He definitely belongs there, without a doubt, and whatnot. Fred Taylor, same with if they have one over in Jacksonville, because I'm not sure. But if they do, he needs to be up there because he's their best back. Even though I was an MGD guy, because MJD did some nice things in a short amount of time that he played. Injuries started getting up on him and whatnot. Both those guys kind of dealt with the injury bug a little bit here and there. But that's what we're talking about. And that's why I say Corey Dillon, and that's why Fred Taylor is not in the Hall of Fame and really shouldn't be inducted in the Hall of Fame. Because in the end, was they that guy? Did they do this on a consistent basis, 14, 15, 16, 17, 1,800 yards? Guys didn't do that. They never led the league. If Corey Dillon would have at least led the league, even with his 16-something against when he played with New England, still didn't get it, but he finished up with like 3,000 and some odd yards and 37 touchdowns. Because, granted, put it this way here. If he finishes up and retires and walks away from Cincinnati in 2003, whenever the time that he finished up, which was 2003, right, with a 34-78 record, this conversation is not even that. It was because of the resurrection of the last 3 years with New England and getting in the ring and being in the playoffs for 3 years in a row. That's what got him even trying to talk about this. If he doesn't have that, if we just going everything based upon Cincinnati, there's no conversation. There's none. There's not even an inch of conversation that we're having about him being that of a Hall of Fame whatsoever. And everybody pretty much knows that. Like I tell you guys all the time, there is no GOAT, as y'all see. No greatest of all time as long as time is still going on. And like I tell you guys all the time, numbers don't lie and get emotional. People do. You guys have a good one. We come back with you later. I'll be talking about Brandon Marshall tomorrow, y'all. Y'all have a good one.